You ever notice how the safest places don't always look like, a fortress? That's because real security isn't just about walls and guards. It's this kind of invisible system all around us, and it's influencing our behavior in ways we don't even notice. So in this explainer, we're going to give you the blueprint, the tools to see and understand this hidden architecture of safety. Let's dive in.
All right, let's kick things off with a bit of a puzzle. Picture this. On one hand, you've got a petty thief just grabbing a laptop from an office. On the other, a complex, violent terrorist plot. I mean, what in the world could possibly connect these two completely different events? The answer is probably not what you're thinking. That's it. In the world of professional security, they both fall under the exact same massive umbrella, industrial security. And that tells you something really crucial right off the bat. This field is about way more than just guards and cameras. It's about protecting an entire organization from anything, and I mean anything, that threatens its ability to function. So this brings us right to the heart of it. What is industrial security? Well, it's the whole practice of protecting a company's people, its property, and its information from a range of threats that is, honestly, much wider than most of us ever imagine. Here's the core definition. Industrial security is all about protecting an organization's mission. It's about making sure a company can do what it was set up to do, whether that's building cars, writing software, or even just serving coffee, and do it safely, efficiently, and without being disrupted. You're basically protecting the very reason the organization exists. And just look at the spectrum of threats we're talking about here. They aren't just from the outside. They can come from an employee stealing small items, that's what's called pilferage, or something as big as embezzlement. They can be super sophisticated, like industrial espionage, or as brutally direct as sabotage and terrorism. Every single one of these threatens a company's ability to just do its job.
Okay, so to fight back against all of that, security professionals, they learn to think like architects building a kind of modern fortress. The whole strategy is built in layers, and it starts with the most fundamental, most visible one, the physical defenses that make up that first line of protection.
The goals of any security measure can be boiled down into 4 simple actions. We call them the 4 Ds. First, you want to deter an adversary. Make your place look like it's just too much trouble. If they try anyway, you deny them access. If they manage to get past that, you have to detect them. And finally, once they're detected, you delay them long enough for our response team to show up and intervene.
So, physical barriers are the most direct way we use the 4 Ds. A big high fence, for example, that's a huge deterrent. It also delays anyone who tries to climb it, which gives security more time to detect them and then respond. See how it works? And you see these things everywhere, and probably never really think of them as security. Fences, okay, that's obvious, they define a perimeter. But those short, thick posts called bollards, or even those decorative concrete balls and giant planters you see outside a building, yeah, they're not just for looks. They are put there specifically to stop a car or a truck from ramming into the entrance.
But here's where things get really clever. Security isn't just about building bigger walls. The most sophisticated defense is one you don't even notice. It's about moving beyond just brute force and getting into the subtle art of influencing human behavior through smart design.
This whole approach actually has a name. It's called CPTED, which stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. And the idea is actually pretty simple but really powerful. You can make a space safer, not by adding more guards, but by designing the environment itself, the lighting, the landscaping, the pathways, to naturally discourage crime from happening in the first place.
So let's really think about that for a second. How can something as normal, as mundane as a park bench or a simple hedge actually act as a security feature? I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, right? But inside the CPTD framework, they are incredibly powerful tools.
Here's how it works. Natural surveillance. Ever notice how new apartment lobbies often have giant glass walls facing the street? That's on purpose. More eyes from both inside and out means fewer places for someone to hide. Natural access control is about using things like a single clear walkway to a building's entrance to make anyone who wanders off that path immediately noticeable. And territorial reinforcement, well, something like a low hedge, creates this subtle psychological line that just says, hey, this is private space, which makes an intruder feel super exposed just for crossing it.
And it doesn't stop there. You've got target hardening. That's your classic stuff. Stronger locks, tougher doors. But then there's something really fascinating. Maintenance. This is basically the broken windows theory in action. A place that quickly fixes graffiti or a broken light sends this powerful signal that someone is watching, that someone cares, and that actively deters crime. And finally, activity support. This is about putting positive things, like a playground or a farmer's market, into a public space. Why? because the steady, normal presence of everyday people is one of the most powerful crime deterrents in the world.
So, we've looked at the physical tools and these really clever design principles, but how do the pros decide what to use and where to put it? They don't just guess. It all starts with the strategic plan, a whole way of thinking that lets you see your own weaknesses before an attacker ever does.
This whole way of thinking is formalized into something called a Security Vulnerability Assessment, or an SVA. It's basically a formal process for looking at your facility not as you see it, but through the eyes of someone who's trying to break in. And to do that, you have to understand the 4 key ingredients of any security problem.
Let's think of it like we're solving a detective story. The very first thing you look for is the weak point. Is it an unlocked back door, an old computer server that hasn't been updated in forever, a really poorly lit corner of a parking lot? That is your vulnerability. It's the opening the bad guy could potentially use.
Okay, next question in our story, what's the prize? What is the attacker actually trying to get? That's your asset. And listen, it is not always a pile of cash. It could be the sensitive data on that old server. It could be the safety of a person walking through that dark parking lot. Or it could even be the company's public reputation. You have to know what's actually worth protecting.
Now, who's the villain in this story? That's the adversary. And yeah, this could be a person with a motive, like a corporate spy or a thief. But an adversary doesn't have to be a person. It could be a hurricane that has the capability to knock out your power, or a fire that could destroy your building. It's really any force that can cause harm. And finally, you have the threat. The threat is the plot of the story itself. It's that moment where all the pieces come together, when the corporate spy, the adversary, uses the unupdated server, the vulnerability, to steal the sensitive data, the asset. The whole point of an SVA is to map out every single one of these potential stories, every credible threat, so you can stop them before they even start. So once you've done that assessment, once you know your assets, your vulnerabilities, and the threats, then you can finally build your security plan. And this isn't just a random shopping list of cameras and locks. It's a strategic, layered system designed specifically to counter those stories you uncovered.
And the plan itself usually rests on 4 pillars. You've got prevention, that's your first move, trying to stop problems before they happen with things like background checks. Then you have control, which is about managing who gets in and where they can go using tools like electronic keycards. Next is detection. That's how you know a line has been crossed thanks to alarms and motion sensors. And finally, you have intervention. That's your response plan, the security team that's ready to roll the second an alarm goes off.
So really, the key takeaway from all of this is that good security isn't a product. It's not something you can just buy off a shelf. It's a process. It's a continuous, living system, a cycle of assessing your risks, designing smart defenses, and always being prepared to respond when things go wrong. So now you have the blueprint. You know the secrets, from the physical barriers and the psychological design tricks all the way to the strategic planning. So I'll leave you with this final thought. Look around your own world, your office, your apartment building. Now that you know what to look for, what's its weakest link?